Hello, One Book, One Norristown. I am Ericka Wharton, the president of the George Washington Carver Community Center located in Norristown, and I will be reading chapter 9 of Lorene Cary's novel, The Price of a Child. As a reminder, where we left off last week, here is a recap of chapter 8. In chapter 8, Hard Swearing, after the filing of the affidavit, Mercer remains in New York at a boarding house. She hears the famous speaker and ex slave Williamson Wells Brown at an abolition event and is greatly inspired by his talk. Tyree comes in and brings her news from Philadelphia. Despite the presentation of the affidavit, Williamson is not released from prison. Mercer agrees to appear at his trial. She and Eliza Ruffin travel to the district court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Mercer is taken Mercer is taken into court under the protection of female Quaker. Tyree, Harriet, Aunt Bee, and Jeremiah are present in the courtroom to support Mercer. After testimony from two other supportive witnesses, Mercer is sworn in as Virginia Pryor and relates to the events of her escape. Although Judge Wells is sympathetic to the Southern interests, he must abide by Pennsylvania law. After greeting Nignag outdoors, Mercer leaves the court and is driven by Mary Sterling's home for safekeeping. Pryor is approached by a slave catcher named Keller and pays him to punish one of the men who helped Mercer escape. And now let's begin with chapter 9, Woman Escaping in a Box. After the rigid order of Zilphia's cottage and the spare richness at the attended homes of New York abolitionists and women's right people, Mercer looked forward to the rowdy welcome of Little Bee's house. Sure enough, Bee wrapped her arms around her and hugged her out the door. Well, look at my old friend. She talked fast and loud. She bounced as she spoke. Etta had written about Bee's anxious periods, but Mercer had never seen one. At first, Bee said, "The fleas died off, thank God, but they didn't those damn rats come back, or at least the Indian scout, we call it, looking for a place to settle. And my famous dogs performed well famously." Bee laughed and then pouted. "At least old Standby did. You know, Standby, of course. You know, he'll go after anything." "I remember, but that other damn dog," Bee said, missing Mercer's smile. "That younger one with the torn ear. 'Member I called him Simple Simon? He was kind of simple, wasn't he? Well, once again, he showed no interest in hunting. No interest whatsoever. Standby was all over here after the damn rat, actually a couple of them, and one ran right in front of Simon and lay there, just stupid." They were still standing in the vestibule. Maddie and Etta came running through the house from across the alley and yelling for Mercer. Mercer stared Bee out of the way and opened her arms. Maddie jumped up onto his mother. She held him on her hip as she had when he was 2, and Etta threw her arms around them both. Maddie grinned. He lost a tooth in the front. Look at this tooth you lost. And look," he said, wiggling the one next to the space. "Give me here," Mercer said. "Let me pull it. I ain't pulled me a tooth in years." Miss Della said, "Wasn't you coming back?" Maddie said. "Oh, honey," Mercer said sadly, "I'm always trying to come back. And if there anything that happened, you got your sister," Bee said. "That's what happened to us," Bee said. It was terrible forced brightness, as if having been orphaned and raised by her sister had been a delightful adventure. Then her face collapsed like a glove, and she stood next to them, appearing conspicuously left out. "Aw, don't be like that," Mercer mentioned for Bee to take 2 steps forward. The older woman looked pleased as she came into the circle of their arms. They stood together for as long as Maddie could stand. When he wriggled, they went to the parlor to sit down. Mercer could not worry about Bee any more for the time being. She pulled the children's warm body close together. They felt robust in her arms, and they smelled like Della's bacon. Mercer gobbled their faces with their eyes, and they soaked into the attention. Their eyes were clear. They showed good color and smooth skin. Mercer wanted to do nothing more than sit still with them by the stove, but Maddie jumped up. "Here, hold on. Look what I brought." she said. Suddenly, she felt almost too tired to keep her eyes open. Go fetch me that bag by the door. She gave Maddie a second-hand toy boat. Mr. Brooks had made a new sell for it. I saw boys float little boats like that in New York. Doesn't need much water. I saw one boy selling it nothing more than a puddle. She gave Etta a black silk hairnet and a tartan plaid hair ribbon. Where'd you get that money? Etta asked. I did laundry out at Miss Dilfa's. She worked you to death, didn't she? I saw your hands when she came in, and I said, I bet Zilphy worked her to death, said Bea. Leastwise, she'll let you keep your own money. She did make you give her anything for board. You're too good to tell, but I bet she did. Hun, you better be glad it was Zilphy, 'cause Manny'll work you to death and then take your money too. And I tell you, he'll say you can't leave 'cause you owe him more. Here, Miss B. Mercer handed Bay 5 sticks of lemon candy. Oh, I love lemon candy. You knew that, didn't you? And you remembered. What Mercer remembered was how B scouted the house for candy when her mysterious supply of whiskey ran out. Maddie raced through the back door to find a puddle boat floating in his palm. Etta moved the footstool to the other side of Mercer's chair. Fire too hot. Etta nodded. Make me so sleepy. Mercer laid her head on the anti-messer. You got something to recite for me? Yes, I do. But you supposed to read what I recite to see do I get it right. I'll get you my scrapbook. Oh, I have a scrapbook? Miss Harriet made us. B had dropped off a dozen. Mercer sat listening to her snore while Etta ran upstairs. Maddie and his boat had collected a small group of boys at the puddle under the hydrant in the alley. Mercer could hear them shouting. Etta came back with her scrapbook. A thought occurred to Mercer. You knew I was coming back, didn't you? Etta nodded her head but dropped her eyes. She's seen plenty. I tried to make Pryor let me bring Benny when he came north, but they wouldn't. And once he took us to Nicaragua, Etta, there wasn't no telling when we'd had another chance at freedom or when we'd get back to Benny either. I'm not going to leave if you can possibly help it, but I'm not going to lie to you either. Things could happen. God only knows what could happen. In the meantime, if something was to happen to me, I'm trying to make sure you two have friends in this world who'll do right by you. Mercer stopped to collect her thoughts. You've been keeping an eye on Maddie, haven't you? Yes, ma'am. Anything happen to me, you'll keep y'all together if you can, sugar. You see how the quick family stays together? That's the way you two stay together. You put your money together, you work together, you pray to your brother Benny. Aunt Susie's rain Aunt Susie's raising him now. Pray for him. They sat in silence, the magical wonder of the reunion gone. You're old enough now, so I can talk to you, Mercer said, with a hint of apology in her voice. So show me your book. Etta's scrapbook was actually used copyright, whose pages were mostly partially blank. Harriet brought a dozen more for a penny apiece at the Quaker school at the end of the year and taught each of her older students how to keep a scrapbook. She insisted on it as she insisted that they would write on them each day one passage she assigned and one that they would choose. We must make a record of ourselves, she told them. Record yourself, children, because no one else will do it for you, and learn from your greatest minds that have gone before. Harriet required that they include French and Latin quotations in their books after their 5th year of study. At least once a week, they had to find a passage among the abolitionist and black-owned peppers donated by parents and sponsored. They read The Liberator, the Anglo-African, and the AME Church's paper, The Christian Recorder. Etta showed the Mercer the cross-stitch cover she'd sewn for her scrapbook. On it went an oak and maple leaf, her full first name, the abbreviation for Philadelphia, and the due date on which she began the book. She'd chosen the design and homepage to Mary Ann Shadd Cary, the black author of Forest Leaves, a book of poetry Etta admired. And they're red and yellow like they were when they came in north and got free. I put my name but not my last name, so in case I lost it, it wouldn't help any slave catchers find us. And I put the date because Miss Harriet said, you always date things. When I was born, Mama, In the fall, just after harvest, I told you that. Do you know the day or the month? I don't know exactly. After I got older, I started taking notice on the dates of things, but not before. I told you that. The question irritated Mercer. It made her remember resentment of prior. She knew when Maddie and Benjamin had been born because of what they told her, Willie had not been able to. Etta turned to the first entry, which she attached with a straight pen. It was an article from the New York Tribune. There, Etta said, pointing. Now I'll recite it and you can follow and see it right. It read, as the public had not been made acquainted with the facts and particulars respecting the agency of Mr. Passmore Williamson and others in relation to the slave case now agitating in the city, and especially the poor slave mother and her two children had been grossly misrepresented, I deemed in my duty to lay the facts before you for publication or otherwise, as you may think proper. On Wednesday, week 2:30 o'clock, the following note was placed in my hand by a colored boy. Etta recited the article. Mercer had seen it before but did not say so. Eugenia Pitts had shown it to her in New York. Mercer felt bad, but she thought that she would save it for the children herself. She was not recording herself. When the hell had the ever time to have recorded herself? Mr. Still wrote it to the paper. Etta was saying, Miss Harriet gave it to me for my reading lesson. How long did it take you to get to read it so smooth? Etta grinned shyly. A long time. Is this Mr. Douglas? Mercer asked. A short passage had been copied on a diagonal in Etta's handwriting. Etta nodded yes and self-consciously. By far the larger part of slaves known as little of their ages as horses know of theirs, and it is in the wish of most masters within my knowledge to keep their slaves thus ignorant. They seldom come nearer to it than planting time, harvest time, cherry time, springtime, or fall time. October, most likely, Mercer said to her daughter. I did tell you that before. I made sure to tell you that, and I told you that it was a warm autumn. Remember? That first night, I sweated so bad. Etta looked peevish. She had asked for a date, not sweat. I told Miss Harriet it was probably October. Then what else to do from me, Etta? Etta shrugged. You want a number, don't you? I'm sorry, sugar. I don't have a number to give you. Don't make no never mind anyway. I don't have a number. They sat a while long without speaking. Bay head tipped up backwards, her mouth open wide. Mercer got up and laid her to the side. The wig slipped over one eyebrow. Damn it, Mercer spread her fingers, placed one hand on each side of Bay's wig, and shoved it back up Bay's forehead. Etta laughed behind her hand. All right, girl, listen. What if I gave a day close as I could come, but it was the wrong day? Etta stopped snickering. She sat straight stubbornly, holding aloft her new pressed hair and tartan ribbon in her spouting breast. She shrugged again. I'm trying to work with you, damn it. You done come up here and start your schooling, and now you want to pretend you know things you don't. And you want me to pretend for you. Why not make up your own today? Mercer wanted to slap her, except that she had nearly decided to be done with slapping her children. Etta collected herself enough to answer. If you gave me a day and there wasn't any other record of any other day, then that would be the day. I was just asking to try to remember. She looked as if she was going to cry. I don't want to make up a day. If you were supposed to, that wouldn't be the same as making one up. I'll think then. Mercer said with a sigh. I'll give you a day by the end of the week. Maddie came in clutching his boat. Did it float? It floats. Come here. I want to tell you something. Look, Mama. Maddie reached under the chair and brought out a newspaper rolled and tied with string on either end. Close your eyes, he said. He put one end on Mercer's ear and the other end of it on the lips. He spoke in a whisper. Mama, can you hear me? I hear you. You got to put your hand over your other ear. Then he spoke even more softly. Can you hear me now? Now I can hear you fine. He began to chant in a tiny voice. It was almost as if your voice was inside her own head. He whispered, I love my boat. I love my mama. I love my sister. I love my eyes. I love my ears. I love my mouth. I love my arms. I love my hands. I love my stomach. I love my legs. I love my feet. I love Mr. Ty. I love Aunt Bay. I love my God. I love my shoes. Mercer pulled the newspaper tube from her ear. Let me see your shoes. He held up his foot. Mr. Ty got 'em for me and some Cyrus. I want you to love your brother Benny too. Even though he's not with us, she said. Maddie didn't answer. He fiddled with the newspaper tube and looked at his shoes. I had to leave. I'm Maddie, but we got to pray for him. You feel bad we left. Maddie nodded. Then pray for him whenever you feel bad. Say, God, I miss Benny, and I wish we could have brought him. Prudence Randall wrote Mercer in care of Eugenia Pitts. Mercer met with her at the home of one of Harriet's friends. It did not surprise her when the lady proposed that she make a lecture tour in New England, but it did surprise her when Miss Randall told her that the Anti-Slavery Society would pay her. The money she could make in one springtime tour was more than she earned in a year of doing laundry. She make enough to pay towards children's rooms and board and then get them into Canada and settle there. But first, she'd have to leave the children again. I'm not sure what I have to say that other folks aren't saying already. She had seen and heard excellent speakers. Then she remembered the man with the stumpy fingers in her afternoon with Eliza Ruffin's group. You did tell the story as you did in the courtroom, said Harriet. And then said Mrs. Randall, you have more to tell. What it was like bondage, what you heard and saw. And of course, we in the Anti-Slavery Society want to tell you people how important it is for them to support the society which is working to bring in an end to the wrongdoings. You could do that. Yes, ma'am, Mercer said. I could do that. Do you need time for me to think of it? Do you, Mercer looked gracefully at Harriet. Yes, I do. Of course you do, Harriet said. Among other things, the case has not been yet decided. She turned the Prudence Randall back to Mercer. If it's in there in your favor, you may be delighted to go around New England. And if it's not? If it's not, Randall said, all more reason I say to go stand and fight. And if the judge is against you, he becomes that much more reason for your celebrity. I don't mean that in any vulgar way. She made a motion with her tiny hands as if she was brushing dirt. I only mean to point out how the outrage of bondage may be used to foil slaveholders and not enrich them. Mr. Frederick Douglass spoke with a price on his head for some years. Speaking with a price on his head, that helps make a quiet draw, said Tyree that evening. I suppose that she did not invite you to speak on the stigma of color here in North, or the reluctance of even devoted anti-slavery people to go beyond abolitionists of slavery to equality. Nope, Mercer said. She didn't say none of that. I'll wag her, she didn't. And she didn't mention that when one of Mr. Douglas's friends offered to buy him out. Some other so-called friends made a quite stink. But why? Because they said it would go against his principles. They were shocked to hear that Mr. Douglas wanted to free more than what he wanted to be a symbol of Southern immortality or morality. They smiled tight smiles as if they were funny. But Mercer felt unsettled. She thought only about money before. Now she imagined herself in front of a pernicious audience, men and women, mostly white. She felt their eyes, curious, incredulous, appraising. She saw it. She knew because Ty saw it. Colored women speaking in public were not as bad as white women speaking in public.